Hello, Next community. So I've kind of been thinking in my head about, look out, it's dangerous up there, about this video. And as you all know, I go treasure hunting for legacy Next applications. And there are so many that I've never seen before. So I'll have a little fun with this video. And I have to laugh about the names of some of these becoming mainstream. For example, this app is called Balling. Okay, and it involves balls in a pyramid, and you kind of line them up and so forth, and you use keyboard controls, and that's pretty fun. And then over here, this madness on the right side of the screen is Boris the juggler, so you can put in different amounts of balls. Let's try that real quick. I can't possibly screw this one up, right? So we'll do 7. Why not 7? And we'll do restart. Oh, where we go. All right, that's supposed to show 7, and then we can do the increase the tempo and frame rate, so forth. So we've got the juggling going. So lots of little games going. So, in fact, I probably will want to stop these games just because we're going to be launching some stuff that's pretty amazing. Then once more, I did not know existed for NeXT. Okay, so this little utility here, let's see if I can bring it forward with any luck. I believe it's called Latin Bird. No, this one's Rosetta. So Rosetta, like the Rosetta Stone, lets you convert. You can pick, say, Amiga and convert the files to NeXT, Atari, Macintosh, MS-DOS. So basically, on the left side, you drop your file in, so you can go NeXT to all of those, or Amiga to all of those, or Atari to all those, Mac to all those, MS-DOS to all. So you can transfer files and convert them back and forth so other operating systems can read them. Pretty amazing if you think about it for the time. And then I believe this one, I should probably just kind of go through them, is called Cassandra. Cassandra lets you set appointments on a calendar. And I'll just kind of click through them one by one. There's Rosetta. This is Hidden App, and it lets you do 3D drawings to scale and change, the scale and the perspective. Kind of a primitive CAD package. ML Voice. So this was, I think it plays DSP voices. And let's see, I found one over here that looked interesting called Radio. So you can do network broadcast radio. I haven't tried it, but that would be kind of fun to see if we can broadcast between NeXTs. There's another one that says it can almost do it in real time, like a walkie-talkie, which is, was pretty far advanced. And I don't believe they had a string and 2 cans, but it was all digital. So, what's that have to do with anything? Well, I got to searching on these CDs, and I found one called the NeXT Objectware CD, and this was actually released in 1995, so fairly far into the game by NeXT. And so, it's kind of a cool layout. You launch what's called the Spotlight app, and it brings up this little directory, and then you can kind of go through, and a lot of the applications are there, and of course it's going to bomb on me, just because that's the way things go. So let me go ahead, I'm going to close Hidden out, I'm going to close Cassandra out. close the radio out. And we are going to go to the demo CD. And within the demo CD, we launched the Spotlight app. And it'll bring up all the different products. So for business, someone had asked me, well, did you ever develop an app and actually use it? And the answer is yes. When I was first starting out with Black Hole, Optimal, we went through several name changes. Alembic to Alembic, Object Technologies to Optimal Object, and then finally Optimal. And then they shut their doors after the NeXT Apple merger. I had written in Compassus NeXT Advocacy a post about NeXT and Apple, a logical fit. Went into work and they said, what did you do? And I said, what? And they're like, well, Apple just bought NeXT today. And they were so tired of trying to figure out the direction of NeXT because I was literally the last guy on the planet still selling Openstep operating system and tools as NeXT was pivoted towards their focus on web objects. But in their back pocket was the merger, and Garrett Reiser contacted NeXT. We had a discussion, Garrett, myself, and Max, my tech, about wouldn't it be a different world, if Jobs had stayed at Apple. And I was like, well, they're BOS are looking into it because, Mac OS is crashing. And I thought about it, and I wrote this article, and, we were both unafraid of the telephone. And so Garrett picks up the phone and calls Ellen Hancock over at Apple. She was a VP over at Apple, and proposed, NeXTSTEP as a replacement. And so there was a lot of controversy because on top of the deal, they got Steve Jobs back. And so, the deal went through and the rest is history. And the post is out there, which is really funny, because, I was thinking, yeah, it'd be great. Everybody else is thinking, oh, it's a disaster. They're going to go bankrupt. Everybody at the office there was like, yeah, that's not going to work. We're going to close our doors. And I went and bought stock. So I bought stock at about $15 a share. And you have to remember, at the time, Apple was losing $1 billion a month. And NeXT direction kept changing. And they were into web objects, which was a big thing. It, turned spreadsheets from being static to dynamic. And everybody's like, well, what does this have to do with the price of tea in China? So to make a long story short, I was laid off 2 weeks later, and I was like, oh, man, what am I going to do now? And about 3 hours later, I get a call from Optimal. They're like, do you want to take over NeXT software third-party sales? Everybody's calling up looking for you. And I was like, I'm in a duplex. And I kind of started Black Hole about 6 months earlier in 96. And so I was lining up hardware deals and then giving Optimal a percentage, when I made sales. So it worked out good for them and for me. And I hired a couple henchmen, Larry Morse and John Hutchinson. Larry we called him the mad scientist, a Yale grad, one of my longtime friends. I actually talked to him yesterday. But so I had rented a room 1 block down my dad had found, and it was a dentist's office storeroom. And so those guys would sit in there and work on the NeXT equipment and box everything up, and we'd ship. So I hit the ground running, right? And then Apple called up and asked if I'd want to take over all the Openstep and NeXTSTEP stuff, all the academic bundles. And I said, sure. So the same day I was laid off, I was set up with all the third-party stuff and continued with the NeXT hardware. And then my buddies over at Deep Space Technologies in Dancing Bear said, hey, we'd like to partner with you on some NeXT hardware deals. And so I wound up being able to do a lot of partnerships. Dancing Bear didn't work out, but Deep Space was great. Shannon, we're still friends to this day. In fact, I talked to him a couple days ago. So here it is, 2024, and still going strong, and I'm still finding stuff I did not know existed. And one of those things is the NeXT Objectware CD here, which is pretty well laid out. So I'm not going to get it to bomb again, but it's got a section for the business apps, connectivity apps, the database apps, and the DevTools apps. And so, getting back to the point where someone had asked, well, have I ever developed an app? Well, I was a coder in COBOL, and I got the best of class out of 200 for this COBOL program I wrote that was on indexing a video store. And I actually had figured out the screen so that it appeared as a U.S. flag. And everybody's mind was blown because you're not supposed to be able to do that stuff in COBOL. And so I had some experience, going in, and I saw the NeXT developer tools the first day at work. I said, wow, these are great. This would have taken me 4 to 6 months to do what I could do in 5 minutes. And so now that the business had hit the ground, how am I going to account for all this? Because my first calls were literally from Johns Hopkins and MIT and Stanford and Harvard and, Florida State. These were all customers, the Air Force, that I'd already dealt with over at Optimal, right? And I knew my stuff. And so by default, they are now all coming to me. And instead of having, I think we had 10 people at the height of Optimal. It's just me, and then I've got Larry and John down the block. And so I said, I need to account for all this. And so I wrote a little database app in Variodata for storing all the customers' info and stuff like that. And then tried to use some of the NeXT tools for the accounting, and it just got to be so big so fast, I switched over to QuickBooks, something that was already readily available, because I knew that going into a custom database was not going to be the answer on top of everything else I was doing from the get-go on the first day. But the first 20 or 30 sales, I probably still have that little app out there. And I remember a friend of mine, Antoine Vallot, he's a really good designer. In fact, he helped design the website. He said, your logo is scaring people away. If you think about it, Black Hole, not many people would name a company Black Hole. And Montgomery Gabrus, we call him Mr. Black. He was I was the sales guy, and he was the guy in charge of doing graphics at Olympic. We were sitting down. We do a lot of things. And he's like, well, what would you name your company? And I was like, I don't know. He said, how about Black Hole? I thought, yeah, that's a good name. And actually, NeXT's version 1.0 Recycler was a black hole. And then you could also do a black hole in the Mandelbrot. And at that time, black holes were only a theory. And so it was funny because one of my customers is actually a Nobel Prize laureate, Kip Thorne, and I revamped the whole webpage for blackholeinc.com last night, so you can all get in there and check out. I think I did a great job. So I've joined the web development team to kind of get some things taken by the rein and get it going into the communication message that I want moving forward. So I think it'll help if I have a little bit of, saying what's going on there. So it's not, the text is "We love you, Rob," and blah blah blah. I was like, okay, I know you guys, you know, you appreciate working for me and stuff, but that's not the message I need on the home page. Purveyors of NeXT hardware and such, and so at any rate, I went in and rewrote it. It looks great. So where am I going now? So this little Spotlight app on the Objectware NeXT CD is really well put together. It's kind of cool. So you've got all the developer tools, which I found really interesting. And then I started looking through my CD collection, and I found something called Scribex. And this was actually from '97, so this might be one of the last NeXTSTEP Openstep software compilation CDs. And there is some cool stuff. Case in point, let's see if I can launch this. If I did not realize this even existed, and probably most of you do not know about this, but as you can see, it's Java Plan. So it's all the Java tools, and this is version 3.0 for NeXT, and it runs on black hardware. So I've been looking at the Java Plan stuff, which kind of may open up a whole new segment that we haven't really worked with, because I don't think many people knew that there was a Java port to NeXT. And on this CD, let's see if I can find it. Let's see, there's some other interesting apps, and including some shareware. Here's the Sun ports for Java Plan. Newsflash, which was a cool little news utility. Latin Bird, the Help Viewer, which I think I showed Latin Bird. Omni Group, and here's a nice PDF viewer for NeXT, a really advanced one. Then you've got all the Lighthouse applications and Impact software with Super Debugger and Super Draw, and a really nice backup utility app called NTAR, and then a little word processor. So the story with Lighthouse was they have a Microsoft Office style suite on steroids of applications for NeXTSTEP. So you got your word processor, spreadsheets, databases, presentation tools that all were very advanced, right? For the time, it was over $5,000 for all those apps. And Sun came in and bought Lighthouse. Steve Jobs was a part owner in Lighthouse, right? And because they wanted them to do Java development, and wow, did they ever. So they actually did all the Java development, apparently proven in this Secret Squirrel CD, starting out on NeXT. And it's really neat to find this, because it kind of fills in that blank. And the idea was Sun was trying to put a bullet in the head of NeXT by taking away their Office suite. And then, of course, the merger came along, and I was saying to him, why don't you guys, because all the Lighthouse apps are free and developed, right out of the gates, they could have offered a suite of applications that would have been similar to Microsoft Office, but Jobs saw the forest through the trees, took a step back, and brought Bill Gates on board, right? And Microsoft actually invested $150 million into Apple and made a commitment to port the apps over to whatever versions of the operating system were coming out. So it was real surrealistic to be at that first developer conference and then see Bill Gates' ugly mug. Not that I should talk. Appear on the screen larger than life. Everybody was like, boo. And then, he's investing in Apple, boo. And these developers were going absolutely crazy. And I don't blame them, okay. Steve Jobs is back. They spent 2 years, several million lines of code, porting over to Copeland. jobs of scrapping Copeland and bringing in NeXTSTEP. And as I say, old Greg Anderson put it best, you're in the land of the blind, selling working eyeballs, referring to NeXT and Openstep and the developer tools, and they aren't worried about what color they are. So, in further development, NeXT had to develop, and Apple, some tools that looked at the existing developer code, okay, to move them forward, because it wasn't an easy sell. So for the first few versions, you had a kind of a hybrid. There was a Rhapsody, and then you had Blue Box and Yellow Box. And so the idea with Blue Box is that developers could continue with their 9.2 Mac OS code that was bombing. That's the reason they needed a new OS. And with the developer tools that NeXT came up with, they could actually look at those applications, and it was like we took 2 steps back to bring everything forward. They said you need to fix this, this, and this. You could ditch all of this. And so it made for a pretty incredible transition. And then once the developers started to gain, respect for Mac OS X, once they saw how it was working, and feel free to jump in and comment if you were an Apple developer at that time. If I'm getting it wrong, let me know. I mean, I'm kind of looking at it from the NeXT side. It would be interesting to hear the inside scoop from the Apple guys. But, especially with what was going on, it was turmoil. Apple was about to go under. And so, the acquisition, or we called it the merger, came at the perfect time. It was like a perfect storm. And so the rest is history. Jobs gets back to Apple, and, they canned most of the product line. They brought in Rubenstein, who was, the brains behind NeXT Hardware, and he had started a company, I believe it was Power Computing, that was a direct competitor to Apple, producing Power Macs, and he was running the Mac OS on those. So they brought him in for the hardware, and of course canned everything and went to the Bondi Blue Mac, which upset, some of these developers and a lot of the longtime Macintosh community, very much, including the 20th anniversary Mac. So it was kind of like they just cleaned house in there and got it down to 4 products. They had to streamline, but it was a strategy that worked. And, then they were able to move forward and come up with things like the iPod and the iPad and the iPhone. And so, we all miss Steve and that next big thing. And the Apple Glass, I haven't tried it, but I hear it's pretty phenomenal. It's still a little early for me. I'm considering getting an Apple Watch. I think it's now mature enough to where, a lot of the kinks are worked out. And I think if they're able to bring the price point down on the glass part of it, that may be more acceptable. I've suggested to some of the higher-ups at Apple that proto-hologram might be a good move, because you don't need glasses. If you want to check that out, go to protohologram.com. I think that is where the future is going as far as technology, honestly. It's a box, and it's 3D, and you guys will be blown away if you haven't seen it. And I happen to have, some of my boxes, they felt nostalgic. They come back and bought NeXT at the spaceship out in Cupertino, running on some of the upper echelons desks, which is kind of real feather in my cap there. But at any rate, so we've got Java planned. I get on these tangents. I'm hoping all this is recording, because I think I'm saying some pretty cool stuff. Scribex, I think, may have been the last compilation CD that was produced. There was a Peanuts upgrade CD, but it does have a lot of neat stuff. Now, someone was asking me earlier about DSP stuff. since Umberto's released the new DSP expansion module. And I did go into the audio section on Peanuts 3, and there are a ton of different apps, including some that are DSP specific, including, Instrument Builder, there's Guitar Tuner, Audio Score Challenger, you can do notation, and so there's a lot of, the music kit, all of that. That was a whole other segment of NeXT, was the fact that digital music got its start here. And Glenn Reed, he did Paste Up, and then he went over to Apple, and he came up with, I believe it was iMovie, and was big in iTunes. And a lot of those guys, I'm trying to think. I think we've got a pretty good video here. I don't want to overwhelm. And I think this screen recording is going to work well. I'm going to go back in and do some screen recordings of the basics, like how to change system parameters and things like that. And I think it makes for a much cleaner presentation. I hope you all like these. I've been getting a lot of positive feedback. And, I'm going to continue to do these as I have time. I invite you to take a look at my blackholeinc.com website. I've redone the home page, and I'm working on the pricing and products section. I've had some help in there, but they weren't, they haven't been as attuned, and it's overwhelming, as to what all the different significance is in the different products and prices. And so I'm kind of jumping in, taking the reins, and joining the team to see if we can get that straightened out. My eBay store's doing great. Computer Powwow. Invite you to go in there, and you can support me by buying stuff. And I try and support a lot of the independent software developers. They don't like to be salesmen, so, or the accountants. So if I'm able to go in and represent them, that's worked out well for me for the past 30 years. I also support authors. Luciano's Inside NeXT book, if you don't have it, highly recommend it. I've sold probably 400 to 500 copies for them over the past few years, and I'm going to probably have to order another run here of 100. I do 100 per year, and everybody loves it, and I'm hoping maybe this next rev, I'll see if he'll be willing to add a few chapters, because I think there's been some interesting developments since version 1, specifically in the previous area, and we're getting a lot of new tech, with the SCSI SDs. I'm working with Zulu SCSI to come up with some really cool stuff, and I've been doing a lot of projects. I think my eventual goal is to put together a book on all this stuff. And I could even have it as a web presentation story, which might be kind of cool. A lot of cans, a lot of irons in the fire. And I really enjoy doing this. Really appreciate everybody's business and patience in all this. And have a wonderful evening. More cool stuff from the black hole to come. Stay tuned. Now, hopefully I didn't. It wasn't too boring. Let's see if I can figure out how to shut this thing off now. So we go over there. I'm still learning my way around it. But here we go. Have a good evening.